Have you taken some time off from working out? Maybe it's been 3 months, 6 months, or more since you've last worked out consistently. You may be wondering how much of the benefits, the results I was getting before, have I lost, and how can I go about getting those back? That's exactly what we want to discuss with you on this week's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast. We're going to cue our introduction and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast, brought to you by Exercise for Life Studios, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset. And the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie.
And today we are discussing this idea of the kind of deconditioning process after somebody stops exercising, okay? You may have been exercising consistently, and then for whatever reason, life happened and you stopped exercising consistently. And it's been 3 months, it's been 6 months, it's been a year or longer since you've exercised consistently. You may be wondering, okay, well, how much have I lost from a strength perspective, a conditioning perspective, a overall health benefits perspective, and how should I go about getting that all back? That's exactly what I want to talk with you about today.
Now, I think it's important to acknowledge that everyone goes through ebbs and flows when they're exercising. When you're a regular exerciser, you're going to notice that sometimes your exercising is at a higher frequency or a higher intensity than other times. And sometimes you are barely scraping by, or you're going with 10-minute workouts because that's all you can fit in. And sometimes something happens in your life that completely wipes you out from exercise. Maybe it's you had a surgery and you have to rest for a certain amount of time, or you've had an injury and you don't know how to exercise with that injury, and so you're not exercising, or you've gotten lazy or busy or whatever it is, but for whatever reason, there's been a chunk of time where you're not exercising regularly. So what is happening with your body during that time? And the thing that is probably the most telling of how that experience is going to be for you is what you've done and built prior to that break.
Absolutely. And so the general rule is the better conditioned you are, the stronger you are when you stop your break, or when you stop exercising consistently, when you start your break, the more quickly you're actually going to notice regressions in your strength and in your conditioning. Because you have to think about, what is it that your body is adapting to, right? It's adapting to the challenge that you're placing upon it. It's adapting to the stress and the stimulus that you are exposing it to day after day after day after day. And so if what you are moving into is a time of little to no stimulus when you're not exercising, well, the more your body was accustomed to having to receive a high amount of stimulus, the more noticeable it's going to be when it goes to not receiving any stimulus, okay? So if you're not working out that hard, you're not, super strong, you're not super fit, you're not super well conditioned, well, then taking some time off, you're going to notice some things, but you're not going to notice it as much as somebody who is really, really strong or really well conditioned, super fit, because that person is having to expose their body to such a high stimulus, and it's such a dramatic difference to going to not doing anything at all. I remember when I was playing college basketball, our first break of the season was over Thanksgiving, and we'd have a game Tuesday night, and we'd be back on campus for practice on Thursday. So we would have Wednesday off, and sometimes actually one year we did have to be back on campus on Thursday on Thanksgiving. The other 3 years we'd have to be back on campus on Friday. So we had Wednesday off, and 3 out of 4 years we had Thursday off. So maximum 2 days off, okay? Here's the thing. If we didn't go for runs, if we didn't work out on Wednesday and Thursday, getting back and going to practice on Friday, you felt so out of shape. You felt so deconditioned just after those 2 days. Now, we didn't have to do a 2-hour workout on Wednesday or Thursday. We just had to let our body know, no, we're still going to be pushing ourselves. We're still going to need to create this change. But as college basketball players, we were in really good physical condition at that time. But when you're in really good physical condition and you take time off, you notice the changes in your conditioning, in your physiology really quickly. But here's the thing, you build it back really quickly as well, okay? And that's kind of the difference, is you notice the regression much more quickly, but you get back to your baseline much more quickly as well.
I think, Charlie, as you're explaining this, it's also really good to note that if you are in really high conditioned state, meaning like you are exercising hard, you're training hard, and then you take a break, it's not like you're going to slip back to, oh, it's really hard to get out of bed, I'm baseline, can't live my life. But what he's saying is that you're going to notice the changes in your conditioning level faster. So again, Charlie, if he takes 2 days off, during that season of life, I mean, you still train really hard. It's not like you're slipping back to, this is my first day of exercise.
Right.
And you're not getting back to close to baseline level. But you are noticing that change because if you think about our bodies, we are energy conserving beings. Like, we do not want to expend energy except if we have to. And so we live in this unique time where we like to expend energy to be better at sports, to have better health, to be stronger, all these things. It's not to run away from the tiger so that we don't get eaten. Like, it's not like that. We're doing it for our own reasons. And so the interesting thing is that the further away from baseline you are, meaning the more conditioned you are, like the higher strength you have, the more endurance you have, the better VO2 max you have, all the things that go along with strength and conditioning and exercising and challenging your body and getting those types of health benefits, that takes you further away from baseline, and it's a bigger energy tax on your body, like for good reasons, but it is a bigger energy task. And our bodies, being these conservative beings, will always say, pull you back to baseline. As soon as that stimulus leaves, I'm pulling you back to baseline. And so if you are further away from baseline, your body is going to quickly start pulling you back. Many people don't exercise that far above their baseline. They might exercise 1 or 2 times a week, and so stopping that is not that big of a difference than being at baseline. And so what we're saying with this high conditioning thing is that if you are exercising a lot and regularly and multiple times a week, and you have a high conditioning level, then that means that if you were to take a break, because you are so high up there, that your body's going to start pulling back, and you're going to notice those changes in conditioning levels faster than someone that's not so far away from baseline. But here's the cool thing, is that you're also going to regain those strength changes, those endurance changes, all the conditioning effects from exercise much more quickly than someone that has never been that far away from baseline or that high up in their fitness level. And so it's important to note that it's still superior, in my opinion, to have that higher fitness level, even though you're going to notice deconditioning effects faster, because it's not like, again, you're getting close to my baseline, I almost can't do the activities of my daily life activities, because you are still so high above your baseline of life activities.
Well, because here's the thing, Julie, is if our goal with this podcast is to spread the message that people need to be exercising, there has to be some kind of incentive for people to be exercising, because people aren't sitting around with just, an abundance of time and energy and thinking, oh yeah, like I have absolutely nothing to do with all this time and all this energy I have. Like, I wish I had some way of expending it. And we're like, hey, you can go exercise. And they're like, oh, brilliant. Yeah, I can use my time and energy that way. Like, that's not the situation people are living in, all right? And so there has to be an incentive aside from that, all right? And so here's the thing. The better conditioned you are, the stronger you are, the more you are going to notice when your body starts to kind of slip from that, when you start to become less strong, when you become less conditioned, when you start to stimulate your body less frequently. So like if somebody's like, so I exercise every single day, okay? If I transitioned from exercising every single day to exercising 1 to 2 days a week, I would feel terrible. I would feel absolutely terrible because of how much of a shift it is from my current state, okay? However, somebody who consistently exercises 1 to 2 days a week, they probably don't feel terrible with that because it's not a shift from their current state, okay? So in order for me to keep feeling good, to keep feeling strong, to keep feeling conditioned and everything like that, I need to keep my exercise frequency up. So why this is relevant is because those of you who are in better physical condition, who are stronger, who are exercising more frequently, you're gonna notice sooner when you stop exercising consistently. It's gonna become not only more of a dramatic shift in like your strengthening and conditioning, but in how you feel overall. And you're like, I want to get back to how I'm feeling, faster, okay? And so because of that incentive, that in and of itself is, in my opinion, like a really strong argument for like, hey, get this ball rolling with, getting in better condition, getting stronger. And that in and of itself, just from the feeling of if it starts to slip, that can be enough of a motivator to be like, okay, no, I need to get back to doing this more frequently. And I need to get back to being in that better condition state, to being in that stronger state. And so that, to me, again, is a big reason why, like, hey, we want to keep spreading this message of making sure you're exercising consistently, because like as you start doing it, it literally becomes easier for your body to do. It doesn't ever become easy because you still need it to be challenging, and that's part of the thing. Like if it ever stops becoming challenging, then you start to lose that stimulus that kind of got you to the point where you're at, and that's when, again, you start to lose strength, you start to lose conditioning, everything like that. So it's always going to feel challenging, but the reward for it feeling challenging actually gets bigger and bigger and bigger the more that you do it, and the stronger and better conditioned you become.
Absolutely. So here's a really good example of that. And then we're going to flip to the flip side. Like, let's say you are listening to this and you're like, well, Julie and Charlie, I do not have high conditioning. Let's talk about that. I'm newer to exercise, or I just don't exercise like 7 days a week. I do it once or twice. We're going to get to that. But okay, so I wanted to give this example because, it just highlights some of Julie's strengths, my strengths. So I used to be a competitive swimmer. And I think for forever in my whole life, I will always be a better swimmer than Charlie. Faster, I'm going to be stronger, I've got better skills than him, and my body type and shape is better for swimming than his is. So I'm always going to be faster and better. And so if we started both training at swimming, right? If we were both saying, every day for 30 minutes we're swimming laps and we're doing a training program, I will progress faster than probably Charlie will, because I have been in the past at a higher level than he has been, right? I was a competitive swimmer, and we could flip-flop the story for basketball and all the skills that are needed for basketball. But at the same time, Charlie, his whole time of doing this training, will probably say, wow, I'm in the best shape I've ever been, because he's never trained for swimming, and now he's like building the ladder, building the foundation for this type of stimulus. And for this whole time training, I will probably always say, I am in terrible swimming shape, and I'm just killing it compared to him, right? Because I have a reference, because I know where my body used to be. So again, I encourage everyone to continue to build their foundation so that it's as big as it can be, because we never know what will come up in our life. I think that if you are a regular exerciser, you figure out how to make exercise regular no matter what's your circumstances. But there can be stuff, health changes, life changes, that takes you away from exercise, and you want to minimize the impact that your health is going to take for that change. Okay, so let's jump to those of you that are like, okay, I'm not in tip-top condition, I'm not a professional athlete, I'm very far from an athlete, but I am exercising for my health. And so here's the thing. When we think about like your baseline of like, with no exercise, this is how my body's functioning. And if we start adding the stimulus of exercise, let's say, you hire a trainer, or you start our membership program and you're exercising, 1 to 2 times a week. That's where usually people start, maybe 3. You're going to start noticing some really positive, great changes. Like almost immediately when people start moving their bodies, they're like, I feel better already. Great. We love that. That keeps people going. But you're also going to notice that with minimal amounts of exercise, meaning you're not exercising enough to feel like you're building a giant foundation, like someone that would be exercising 7 days a week, or someone that is exercising like a whole hour every day versus, 10 minutes or whatever it is. You're going to notice that when you do stop your exercise, that you're not going to notice as big of changes in the negative. Reason being is you're not that far away from your baseline, right? Because you're not exercising enough to take you far, far away from baseline. Unless you're like, well, I exercise really hardcore 3 days a week, I really push myself, and I've been doing this for 10 years. That's like a big base, right? But most people that are only exercising 1 to 3 times a week, they've probably only been exercising for, this is like their start, right? Because usually once you start exercising, you do it more and more, and you're just more and more active. So I guess in some ways, that's kind of like you just don't notice it as much, but it's also kind of a slippery slope, because I think it's a good thing when you notice, like, oh boy, I need to get back to moving. That's like a good thing to have in your brain and your body, like you feel it. And so that is the flip side of if you are not hoping to be, or you are not like a highly conditioned, or you're not trying to be a highly conditioned person.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the most positive things that clients who take a break and then kind of come back in say is like, wow, like I definitely noticed, when I wasn't exercising frequently. Maybe, they went on a 2-week vacation, or things got super busy with work and they just weren't able to come in as often as they had for a stretch of time. And they're like, yeah, I'm definitely noticing that, I don't feel as strong. I don't feel as fit. I don't feel as mobile. My body's feeling achier and things like that. And that's because they had progressed themselves far enough from their baseline that they started to notice that regression. So noticing that regression, like you're saying, Julie, that's a really good thing. It's, again, in some ways like a warning sign from your body of like, hey, we got to keep pushing because you're starting to lose it and stuff. So if you are starting to notice that, the big mistake that we see people make is when they start to notice, okay, my conditioning is going down, my strength is going down, is they try to jump in too deep too quickly. Okay, they try to go back to everything that they were doing before they took their break, in hopes that it will help them get their body back faster, get their strength back faster, get their conditioning back faster. And the thing that will actually help them get all of those things back faster is not the intensity, but rather the consistency with their exercise, okay? Going and exercising, if you took, 6 months or more off and you're like, wow, gosh, I need to get back to it. I used to exercise 5 days a week. And when I would exercise 5 days a week, I would go for an hour. I would go, really heavy. I'd go really intense and everything like that. Aim to go more for the 5 days a week than the heavy, the hour, the longer, the intense, everything like that. And get that frequency up first. And once you're able to get that frequency up and keep that frequency consistent, then you can start to play around with, all right, going a little bit longer and then going a little bit more intense. A lot of times people, again, kind of do that progression backwards, where they start with longer or intense, and then they're like, yeah, my body just can't handle that, okay? So that's what I say, okay, take your time easing in with the intensity and the duration, but try to get that frequency up first.
That's right. I think that our brains as humans, especially, I want to say just like Americans, but I think it's just the human brain, is like, when we say we are exercising, we want there to be not just a small check mark, but like a giant check mark. And so we get a more gianter check mark in our brains if it was like really sweaty, so hardcore, the whole yada yada. And that's what really knocks us out of the park when we're trying to rebuild back in exercise regularity into our schedule. And so thinking about adding in the frequency first, so that we're teaching our body like, hey, on a regular basis, we have this challenging-ish thing. It's not crazy, but we have this stimulus that is higher than our baseline that we're going to adapt to. And then once we get used to the regularity of it, then we can start building in, okay, now I'm starting to build my weights higher. Now I'm starting to push myself a little more on the bike. Now I'm starting to vary my exercises more and start to incorporate all the pieces that I know I need to have. And so making sure that as you're building back in, you are building it like something that can be built versus like something from the top down where you're like, well, I used to swim for 2 hours straight, so let's just start out with a 2-hour swim workout. Or that would be a terrible place to start. You should start with 15 minutes or something like that. See how you feel.
Exactly. And so as you're easing yourself back in, the 4 keys that you need to keep in mind are the 4 exercise for life principles, making sure that you are following those principles with every exercise that you do, every single workout. Because if you have the mentality of, okay, I'm just starting out, but I know that I need to come back and do this again tomorrow, that means how you're exercising today can't compromise your ability to come back and exercise again tomorrow. In fact, in some ways, it needs to set you up to come back and exercise again tomorrow. So if you're starting off and you're thinking, well, I'm going to do it, twice this week or whatever, well, then that leaves you a lot of leeway and a lot of margin to beat yourself up during your workout and, feel achy and sore. And, that's okay because you've built in, hey, 5 days out of the week you're not going to exercise, and 2 days out of the week you are. But again, that's not really a recipe for long-term success when you're trying to get back into the swing of it. Prioritize the frequency of how often you are going. And if you are thinking, okay, well, I need to come back and do this again tomorrow, that naturally is going to limit the duration that you go. It's going to limit the intensity that you go. And when you can find that level of exertion where you're able to push yourself, but still recover fast enough that you can come back and exercise again the next day, then you can maintain that. And then after doing that for a week or two or a month, then you can be like, okay, cool, now I can increase the intensity. Now I can increase the duration and start to play with those variables because you already have your frequency locked in.
So a big concern that a lot of people come to us with, maybe you're thinking this right now, is, I've taken a break, I'm jumping back in, what are my thinking here? So we know we're focusing on frequency to start, and then we're building intensity. And when we're thinking about building intensity, that's where we really want to see you start incorporating the 4 Exercise for Life principles. We've brought them up, we talk about them all the time on our podcast, but the 4 Exercise for Life principles that we apply to every workout that we do in our membership and with our clients, ourselves, all the things, it's the principles that you employ when you exercise that keeps you safe and it keeps your exercise repeatable. It doesn't keep the exercises easy. You can make them easy and use the principles, and you can make them really difficult and use the principles. Because the thing that we see time and time again is that people think they need to either exercise easy and consistently and regularly, or they push it and push hard and then risk that injury, risk that next 2-month break or whatever it is that takes you out from the gym. And so in our membership, we guide everyone, and we'd love for you to join us in these workouts, in how do you apply the 4 Exercise for Life principles as you're exercising, as you're building your body up, or as you're maintaining your body with your exercise and with your weight training. What we do is we teach you how to take the 4 Exercise for Life principles and apply them to every single exercise. We talk you through it, we do it with you, but basically we want to see you, number 1, exercising with your full pain-free, symptom-free range of motion. We want you establishing your moving and non-moving parts. We want you moving slowly, and lastly, we want you connected and focused on your muscle squeeze. And when you're doing these 4 things on repeat all the time during your workouts, it's what allows your exercise to, again, build and be building on each other versus, going back to what you've done, potentially risking some injury and kind of going at things haphazardly.
So if you'd like to join us in this membership, right now you can get a 30-day free trial to the entire membership. All you have to do to get started is go to www.exerciseforlifestudios.com. So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know that is starting up a workout routine after taking an extended period of time off? Share this episode with them so they can understand what some things that they can expect from their body are and how to go about progressing themselves back to exercising more consistently again with higher intensity, with a longer duration, without risking injury, soreness, achiness, any of the negative stuff that we don't want. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or whatever platform you listen to us and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find our podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us a 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week.
This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.